As many of you may be aware, Paul Reubens, aka Pee Wee Herman, passed away this week after a lengthy battle with cancer that he chose to keep secret from the public. It honestly kind of came out of nowhere, and it shocked many 90s and 80s kids who may have been fans of Pee Wee Herman growing up. I always found the story of Paul Reubens, and by proxy the Pee Wee Herman character, to be very fascinating. It's interesting the path that he went down as a performer. All sorts of twists and turns, some not really all that great, but the funny thing is, this is an actor who by all means should have been typecast as the Pee Wee Herman character, but in a funny, weird way, he was actually able to portray other roles in movies and make them separate from the Pee Wee character, while still also being completely associated with the Pee Wee character. Like, I used to just call this actor Pee Wee Herman. I didn't know his name was Paul Reubens until I was maybe 12 or 13 years old. Paul Reubens' career as a performer, and by proxy the Pee Wee Herman character, go all the way back to the 1970s, when Paul Reubens joined the comedy team known as the Groundlings. He performed alongside Bob McClurg, John Paragon, Susan Barnes, and the great Phil Hartman. Phil Hartman is actually the one who helped Paul Reubens develop his improv skills, along with helping create the character of Pee Wee Herman, who would go on to define Paul Reubens' entire career. The early version of Pee Wee is very different from the one that a lot of kids grew up with. He was a lot more adult-oriented and kind of rude. One of his first appearances off stage was in Cheech and Chong's next movie. And it's really weird because you look at the character and then you remember him when you were a kid and you're like, wow, that pivoted a lot. He is nothing like he would be, you know, when he got popular.
Let me go! Fucking asshole! Get out of me! Let me go! Fucking moron! Let me go! Attica!
The popularity of the Pee Wee Herman stage show led to several appearances on David Letterman in character and a later tour of the United States, which then in turn led to Reubens going to Warner Bros. To pitch a movie based on the Pee Wee Herman character. Pee Wee's Big Adventure was really the big jumping off point for what we all know as 90s kids and 2000s kids as Pee Wee Herman. He's basically an overgrown man-child surrounding himself with wondrous inventions. But in the early stages of development, there was actually a completely different movie that Paul Reubens was writing, but when he was touring the WB lot, he noticed a lot of people riding bikes and asked when he was getting a bike. Upon being handed a 1940s era Schwinn bike, Paul Reubens was stricken with inspiration, decided to change the entire movie and make it a movie about Pee Wee Herman's relationship with his bike and an adventure to recover it after it goes missing. It's also worth noting that Pee Wee's Big Adventure marked the directorial debut of Tim Burton. It's weird to think that without Pee Wee there would not have been Batman or Beetlejuice. Now, Pee Wee's Big Adventure is technically a family movie, but it has some really weird shit in it. Large Marge, Pee Wee's disturbing clown dreams, some sexual innuendos. Many of us look at this as a kid's movie, and maybe it was intended to be a kid's movie, but we see it as such because we watched it when we were kids. But looking at this through the perspective of an adult, this is not a kid's movie. It's not like an adult movie, but it just has some really bizarre and off-putting moments in it. It's definitely a contributing factor to how 80s and 90s kids have some weird attachment for the dark and bizarre when it comes to children's entertainment. And this is no doubt due to Tim Burton's style and influence. Like, there's a reason you always see some weird single 35-year-old woman with a Nightmare Before Christmas shirt on. I'm obviously joking, but if you haven't seen Pee Wee's Big Adventure, the movie is actually straight up a good time and I highly recommend it. Pee Wee's Big Adventure was a pretty major success and made $40 million domestically against a $7 million budget, and it launched the career of director Tim Burton, and it definitely helped move things along for composer Danny Elfman. The immense success of Pee Wee's Big Adventure led to CBS approaching Paul Reubens about creating a Pee Wee Herman animated series. This did not pan out. So instead they signed Paul Reubens on to do a live-action children's program featuring the Pee Wee Herman character. In 1986, Pee Wee's Playhouse debuted, and it stripped the rest of the adult aspects of the character, what few that remained after Adventure, but it also took some of the Groundlings actors from the original stage show and brought them in as recurring characters. Yes, Miss Yvonne is Charlie Kelly's mother, and yes, that is Lawrence Fishburne as Cowboy Curtis, who was not associated with the stage show. And it also featured John Paragon and Phil Hartman returning from the Groundlings. Playhouse not only had a colorful cast of human characters, but it had an array of creative puppets and talking appliances. Like, when I think of a children's show, I picture Pee Wee's Playhouse. It's that synonymous with children's shows to me. And it was a smash hit. It was praised for both its creativity as well as its diverse cast, and as a result, it absolutely killed it every year that it was on the air when and it was nominated for Daytime Emmys. Over the course of 5 seasons, it won 10 awards. Looking at it, I think the appeal of the Pee Wee Herman character for kids audiences versus its original adult audiences is that, you know, kids want to grow up, but they also still want to be kids when they get older. And that's all Pee Wee was just a big overgrown kid. Which, was also what Michael Jackson was. Although I'm not gonna lie, I should correct myself. I said they stripped most of the adult aspects of Pee Wee Herman as a character and as a concept, but no, they like crammed as many sexual innuendos into this show as they could.
And you should have smoke detectors placed throughout your home to warn you of the presence of smoke or fire.
I have a smoke detector in my bedroom, over my bed.
While Playhouse was going on, Paul Reubens was tasked with making yet another Pee Wee movie, Big Top Pee Wee, which I'm not going to get too much into now because I want to do this one on its own because I have words. All I really have to say is that when I was a kid, absolutely loved Pee Wee's Big Adventure, like was obsessed with Pee Wee's Playhouse, did not care for Big Top. Big Top Pee Wee was produced by Paramount and not Warner like Big Adventure, and the tone of the film is a lot different from Big Adventure. It's just a kind of weird and off-putting movie. The only thing it really does bring over from Big Adventure is the musical talent of Danny Elfman. I'm gonna get a lot more into Big Top Pee Wee in a later video, but all I have to say is that this movie was not the success that Big Adventure was. In fact, it was not a success at all. In fact, one may say it was the complete opposite of a success. It was a complete failure. It made $15 million against a $20 million budget. But that was fine because he still had Pee Wee's Playhouse, which continued to run throughout the mid to late 80s, making the Pee Wee character a household name. Aside from the praise that I mentioned earlier, it was praised for being a children's educational show that also encouraged kids to be artistic, and as it got more popular, it had more high-profile guests on it. Even when it was decided to cancel the show in the spring of 1990, there was a very lucrative deal for reruns on the table, as the show was still immensely popular with kids. Hell, I was like 4 or 5 when I saw this show, roughly 6 years after the show concluded, and I absolutely loved it. I could not get enough Pee Wee, and like when you're 4 or 5, you just like watch the tape and then you're like, oh, I'm gonna rewind it and watch it again. Like I've seen the High Top Video logo so many times, it's like burned into my brain. So it's safe to assume that a lot of kids, even long after the show ended, were probably getting the home videos, and as a result, it was still making money on home video sales. However, I mentioned home video. When I was a kid, this show was not on TV, not even in reruns, and I think we all know why. In July of 1991, Pee Wee Herman actor Paul Reubens was caught by an undercover police officer exposing himself at an adult theater, which really means, as my cousin told me when I was 5, Pee Wee got caught in a movie theater playing with his wiener. And I just want to say, fuck you, Basil, for telling a goddamn 4 or 5-year-old dad, because I knew kind of what it meant. I knew it was bad. I knew he was not supposed to be doing that, and that he was a pervert. It's like he kind of just like ruined the perception of my favorite kids show as a kid, and you're a dick. But yeah, he got nailed for public masturbation. While Paul Reubens didn't suffer much in the way of legal repercussions, the damage to his reputation, specifically as a children's entertainer, was irreversible. Reruns of Pee Wee were pulled, and he has one of the worst mugshots ever, and this led to numerous jokes about the incident at Reubens' expense.
Doug, man, maybe you should try distracting them by doing what Pee Wee Herman did in that movie.
First of all, I don't think it's appropriate. Second, I'm not really in the mood.
The Simpsons in living color, they had their go at him during this period. And, you know, I gotta say, like, I wasn't around for this. I know you're technically not supposed to do it, but, like, what is the point of a porno theater if you can't rub one out with the boys? Like, as a kid, and even as a teenager, I figured that's what the porno theater was for. You go there, you watch a porno on a big screen, and you rub one out. I guess technically you're not supposed to get caught or whatever, and, like, I imagine if a cop is having a slow day, they'd be like, you know what, let's go see if we can get some pervert jacking it at the porno theater. It's an easy win. But like, like nobody watches porn to not jerk off. You aren't taking in the cinematography. Yeah, man, I was watching this movie and like Christy Canyon was just getting railed from all ends and they just like jizzed all over her and like it was very avant-garde, quite Deacons-esque. Now I'm just picturing like an 80s porno but with like the Hans Zimmerman music, like BWOOM! But in all seriousness, like what is expected of going to a porno theater? You just sit there quietly like watching. It's like, bro, you're watching a chick get screwed. Paul Reubens would plead no contest to the charges and be given 75 hours of community service to avoid a charge on his record, and part of this community service included filming a PSA for crack.
This is crack.
Yes, the infamous "This is crack" PSA, which is just really awkward and kind of funny. I did not see this until about high school because it didn't air on TV when I was a kid. I was probably not even born yet. And years after it initially aired, it became a hit on YouTube. Some uploads have over 1 million viewers. It's just one of those things from like 80s and 90s TV that everybody forgot about, but due to the era of the internet, it got rediscovered. I kind of miss that. Can somebody go like rediscover some more shit? That was a fun time. Even the Nostalgia Critic got in on it. I gotta say though, I'm watching this, it's like, I don't know if this makes me not want to smoke crack, but get those community service hours in there, Pee Wee. Following the incident, Reubens did appear in character as Pee Wee Herman at the MTV Music Video Awards, and he made a little comment about the incident.
Heard any good jokes lately?
And he would make his final appearance in character in a Grand Ole Apres tribute to Minnie Pearl, whatever that means. Reubens would take a bit of time off from acting, and he would do small little acting bits to keep himself occupied and pay the bills, I guess. He appeared in Batman Returns, Matilda, the Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie, until he would later find himself in a regular role again with Murphy Brown, where he played a recurring character and was even given his first non-Pee Wee related Emmy nomination. Good times would continue for Reubens when in 1999 he would appear on talk shows out of character, as by this point the Pee Wee character was essentially retired. He found himself experiencing somewhat of a career resurgence in the aftermath of the porno theater incident. He was in the comic adaptation Mystery Men, which didn't do so well at the box office, but was a cult hit that more than likely made its money back in home video, where he portrayed the flatulent superhero known as the Spleen. Following this, in 2001, he appeared in the movie Blow as a flamboyant drug dealer, a role for which he was praised for and received many offers for other movie roles. That is until 2002, when he got hit with a CP charge, and yeah, not a lot of people talk about this one, but this is a bad one. The story goes that the LAPD arrived at his home with a search warrant based on a tip from a witness in the recent Jeffrey Jones CP case, where they found about 70,000 items of quote-unquote kitsch memorabilia. There were magazines, drawings, photos, some grainy videotapes depicting, young people. His representative stated that the reports were inaccurate, and all he had were some very old photos and Rob Lowe's sex tape, and that's not good. And this was during a weird period where a bunch of people associated with Tim Burton got hit with similar charges, and most of them beat the charges because they were technically like paintings and stuff, you know, besides Principal Rooney, he got the brunt of it. But in the end, Reubens was able to avoid any serious penalties by taking a guilty plea, dropping his child pornography charges to mere obscenity charges. Now, I want to point out that it's a little different, and it's not like he had a bunch of dark web material, but then you look back at it and you're like, at the end of the day, you still had a bunch of depictions of underage boys. That's really fucking gross, Pee Wee. As a result, Paul Reubens would be required to register as a sex offender, and throughout the case maintained that what he owned was art instead of, well, what it was, which, that's still fucking gross, Pee Wee. I think what bothers me the most about this is the fact that, he's just maintaining that it's, not anything sexual, and that it's, just some weird stuff that he's collecting. And it's bro, you're doing mental gymnastics. There's clearly something going on here if you have what was described as 70,000 pieces of this type of photography. I didn't want to come up here and drag a dead man, but nobody talks about this. It just kind of got brushed under the rug, and it's bro, the man had a CP collection. Whatever perspective he's giving about that collection, it's still pretty gross that somebody would be fascinated by it. He claims it's just a bunch of, old vintage photographs and magazines, and it's just that's up there with, the weird weeb guy who's, who's drawing these, hentai images, and he's oh, well, she's actually a 700-year-old goddess, but she's also just a drawing. It's bro, it's fucking gross. It's a depiction of children. I know some people are gonna be oh, well, he's long dead now. Why are you bringing this up now? It's honestly, I didn't know about this. I forgot about this. This just kind of came up while I was doing my research. I was oh my god. This happened when I was 10 years old. I didn't know what any of this stuff was. I do recall hearing something in the news, but I just kind of assumed they were going back to the porno theater incident. But this is much worse. And I'm not doing this I didn't make this video intending to do a hit piece on Pee Wee. Initially, it started as a tribute, but as I started reading, I found this out, and I was oh my god, that did happen. And it's I can't not bring that up, especially with the weird way that the whole thing ended and just kind of vanished. I would not be able to live with myself if I just did not bring this up. And trust me, it hurts me to bring this up, but it has to be done. I would not be able to live with myself as somebody who makes videos on YouTube if I did not go into this. And trust me, This isn't the only person who I really liked as a child that I'm gonna have to end up dragging in a video down the line. At this point, his prospects as a serious actor had completely fizzled. I think it's funny that this incident doesn't get nearly as talked about as the theater incident, and I think that's because it wasn't nearly as publicized or parodied in the media. Like, off the top of my head, the only parody of this incident that even comes to mind from around that time period was that Eminem video, which combines aspects of his first incident where he's jerking off with aspects of the second incident where it's an Olsen Twins movie. Which is really funny because I remember, like, when I was, 10, 11, when this all happened, kids around my age mixed the two incidents up and legit thought that the porno theater incident was him getting caught jerking off in a kid's movie. Which is actually really funny when you think about it. We broke and telephoned that, but he was still technically bad. Following the CP charges, Reubens would still make small appearances in film and television, and in 2009 he revived the Pee Wee character and brought back the original stage show, which was a success. It really goes to show that in Hollywood, if you know how to make money, you can make certain aspects of your character go away. The stage show was successful, and that led to Pee Wee's Big Holiday. I never watched Big Holiday, it seemed a little bit too childish for me at the time. With the Pee Wee character revived, Reubens actually developed two scripts for Pee Wee movies. One was a dark comedy Pee Wee movie, and another was a movie based on Pee Wee's Playhouse, titled Pee Wee's Playhouse the Movie. He had actually approached Tim Burton to help him develop it, and wanted Johnny Depp to take up the role of Pee Wee, and let's just say I'm glad that that didn't happen. Pee Wee's return to pop culture was short-lived, but it was somewhat memorable. I remember him appearing on WWE Raw during its guest host era, and it's actually canon that he is Big Show's cousin. But shortly after the revival of the Pee Wee character, he would just fade away, but at least this time it was on a higher note. That still doesn't, make this go away. It's still weird that we all just kind of forgot about the 2002 charges. Nevertheless, Pee Wee Herman was a major part of my childhood, and it's a shame that both times the character was relevant, I was either not alive or just not interested. It's an even bigger shame that Pee Wee Herman, aka Paul Reubens, may just be a giant fucking sex pervert. I don't want to drag a dead man. It is a shame that he passed away after a lengthy battle with cancer, and despite what I may think of him and what he did, and what speculations I may have on his personal life, he was a damn good performer whose character is preserved in pop culture history. It's also a shame that it's open to interpretation whether or not he was a full-on pervert. Maybe it's for the best that he didn't know kids were running around saying he got Maybe it's for the best that he didn't know kids were running around saying he got caught jerking off in a kid's movie. I think it's both sad and hilarious that this aspect of his personal life came to actually define his career. Like, people still make jokes about Pee Wee jerking off in a porno theater. It's just like cemented in history and it will always be something associated with him. But I really do think the 2002 thing really deserves more attention. But hell, like, it is pretty funny when I told my dad that Paul Reubens died, my dad's first thing he texted back to me was, well, he's pulling his wire in the big porno theater in the sky. It's gotta suck that these jokes are just gonna keep flowing. Rest in peace, Pee Wee. What's your relationship with the Pee Wee character? Let me know in the comments. And honestly, this seems like an algorithm chase, but Pee Wee was an important part of my childhood, and I was kind of working on the Big Top Pee Wee review. I just felt I needed to do something on Pee Wee in the wake of Paul Reubens' death. And while I did kind of drag him a bit, I still will admit that he is a talented children's entertainer. Anyway, like, subscribe, Men in Black is coming up next. And it doesn't matter if the pictures were taken in the 40s, it's still a depiction of children.
This is crap.